The Oakwood Secret. Sheriff Frank Donovan woke up at 6 a.m. sharp, as he had for the past 30 years. Without opening his eyes, he reached to his right. The spot next to him in their four-poster bed was empty, smelling faintly of fresh coffee and the delicate, floral perfume the one Elizabeth wore. She had never let him leave for work without breakfast. He walked down the wooden staircase of their two-story Victorian in the idyllic town of Oakwood Heights. It was small, just 3,800 residents, but Frank and Elizabeth were considered local elite. He, the county sheriff, she, a successful antique shop owner and tireless charity organizer. "Morning, darling," Frank said. Elizabeth stood by the fireplace, elegant in her silk robe. At 57, she looked a decade younger, her slim figure and perfectly coiffed blonde hair giving her a flawless, graceful posture. "Hello, sweetheart." Frank kissed her cheek. "Another dawn patrol. I hope to finish my paperwork before the event at the library tonight. You do remember it's the charity gala tonight, Frank?" He nodded. He'd certainly have forgotten if she hadn't reminded him. Elizabeth's organizational skills were impeccable. His were often absent-minded. Still, he was the best sheriff Oakwood Heights had ever known. Breakfast was perfect. Scrambled eggs with chives, crisp toast, and strong coffee. They ate on the screened-in porch, overlooking the garden, a testament to Elizabeth's impeccable taste. Deputy Dave was practically swooning again yesterday. "Asking for your secret to eternal youth," Frank grinned, remembering his conversation with Dave Miller. Elizabeth laughed, a little tensely. "Tell him the secret is a happy marriage. 30 years after waking up next to a man who still looks at you like you're the eighth wonder of the world. You don't need beauticians." They had met in Denver 32 years ago. Frank, then a young patrolman, had spotted Elizabeth at a charity ball. It took 2 months to get a first date, and 6 more to propose. Elizabeth spoke little of her past, only that she grew up in an orphanage and had a brother, Robert, with whom she had lost touch. Frank never pressed for details. A year after they married, they moved to Oakwood Heights. "What time are you aiming for tonight?" Elizabeth asked. "I'll try to be back by 6, so I can get into my tux," Frank replied, putting on his hat. Frank kissed his wife and backed out. Dave Miller was already at the station. Frank sat at his desk, reviewing reports. It was a typical Oakwood Heights day. He got home early, around 5 p.m. He wanted to surprise Elizabeth, but her car wasn't in the driveway. On the kitchen counter was a note: "Urgent trip to Denver to finalize a matter. Back by 6 o'clock. Dinner is in the oven. Kisses, E." Denver was an hour's drive away. An urgent, 60-minute round trip. The thought made him uneasy. He dialed his wife's number, but the call went to voicemail. He sighed and went upstairs to change. At the gala, Elizabeth was radiant. Frank had noticed her distracted and anxious for the past 2 weeks, but she played the role of the perfect hostess flawlessly. Jack Morrison, their neighbor and friend, clapped him on the shoulder. "Your Elizabeth is unstoppable. Look how beautiful she is tonight." The evening was a success. When they got home, Frank still felt the vague unease about her trip to Denver. "How did the urgent matter go?" he asked. Elizabeth hesitated. "It was fine. A flower shop near me burned down, but I managed to finalize everything. I should have told you. It was too spontaneous." She quickly slipped under the covers. "I'm exhausted. Let's sleep." Frank wanted to ask more, but he decided not to press. Elizabeth turned off the light and faced the wall unusual for her. A crack in the foundation over the next few days. Frank watched his wife closely. Twice, he noticed her whispering into the phone. On Friday, the phone rang while Elizabeth was in the shower. Frank picked up. "Hello, Donovan residence. Elizabeth, I have the results. We need to talk." A man's voice said. "I'm sorry, this is her husband." "Who is this?" My apologies. Wrong number." The call was cut off. When Elizabeth came downstairs, Frank told her about the call. Elizabeth turned pale, but quickly recovered. Debt collectors. They must have the wrong number again. That weekend, they went to the Morrisons for a barbecue. Frank noticed Elizabeth hiding her phone when it vibrated. She excused herself. and went outside to answer it. When she returned, she looked unnerved and pale. "Everything all right?" Frank asked. "Yeah, just a client. Looks like he'll have to go to Denver next week." Frank nodded, but he noticed Jack giving Elizabeth a strange, discerning look. They got home late. Elizabeth went straight upstairs. Frank stayed up. Something was clearly happening. He went upstairs later. Elizabeth was asleep, or pretending to be. He checked her bedside phone. A new text notification was hanging there. "Robert, the results are confirmed. Time is short. Need to finalize." Frank placed the phone back. Robert, the brother she supposedly hadn't spoken to in years. He decided he would talk to her tomorrow. The truth revealed in the morning. Elizabeth was gone, leaving a note, "Urgent call to Denver. He'll be back tonight. Don't worry. Love, E." The life they had built for 30 years was suddenly covered in cracks. Elizabeth returned late that afternoon. Frank was waiting. "I talked to Robert," he said. "He told me the truth about you. About both of you." Elizabeth closed her eyes. "Frank, it's true," she whispered. "You're a man," he interrupted, taking a step. "Tell me now, you were born a man." She nodded slowly. "Yes, but I've always been a woman inside." 30 years of deceiving me," he said, voice choked. "I wasn't lying." Elizabeth got up. "I just didn't tell you about the past because it doesn't matter anymore." "It doesn't matter." Fury rang in his voice. "You think it doesn't matter to me that my wife was a man? I am the same woman you fell in love with 32 years ago," Elizabeth said, trying to stay calm. "Nothing has changed." "Everything has changed," Frank said, his face contorted with anger. He felt his hand reaching for his holster. His fingers clutched the grip of the gun, and he drew the weapon. When Elizabeth saw the gun, she froze. "Frank," she said calmly, "put the gun down. Let's talk peacefully." "How can I talk peacefully?" His hand with the gun trembled. "My entire life has been built on a lie." "I know you need time." Elizabeth's voice was strained. "You're shocked. But Frank, we can get through this together." "Together?" He laughed bitterly. "Do you really think we can stay together after this?" "I don't know," she replied honestly. "But I know the last 30 years weren't a lie. What we had between us was real." Frank looked at her. His anger began to give way to deep, agonizing confusion. "I don't know who you are," he said quietly. "I'm your Elizabeth." Frank, the gun in his hand, began to lower. Maybe they could talk. At that moment, a loud bang from a firecracker outside startled him. Frank, trained by years of police work, instinctively flinched. His finger involuntarily squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out. Elizabeth shuddered. A red spot spread across her blouse. She fell to her knees and then collapsed onto her side. "No," Frank whispered, throwing the gun away and rushing to her. He pressed his palm against the wound. "Elizabeth, hold on. Don't you dare." He dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "I shot my wife. Please hurry." Elizabeth looked up at him. She tried to say something, but only a faint groan escaped her lips. The bullet had gone straight through her heart. She weakly squeezed his hand. Her lips silently uttered a word, and then the light in her eyes faded. The hand Frank was holding went slack. "No," he whispered, pulling her to him. "No, no, no." He sat there, holding her lifeless body, until the police arrived. They handcuffed him and read him his rights. The weight of the secret at the station. Dave looked at him with horror. "Frank, what happened?" "Elizabeth, she's dead." Frank's voice was lifeless. "I killed her." "But why point a gun at her?" Dave asked, unable to comprehend. "She was a man," Frank said with vacant eyes. "All this time, 30 years, I was married to a person who was born a man." Dave shook his head incredulously. "And because of that, I don't know what came over me." Frank dropped his head into his hands. "I just lost it. And then, that firecracker. I pulled the trigger involuntarily. Oh God." Frank was transferred to the county jail. Investigator Lawrence Sanford from the homicide unit came to see him. "Mr. Donovan, you admit to shooting her?" "Yes." "You're saying it was an accident?" "Yes." Frank nodded. "But that's no excuse. Nothing can justify what I did." The investigator wrote something down. "Was your wife threatening you?" "No." Frank shook his head. She was just trying to explain. And I couldn't handle the truth. You will be charged with first-degree murder, Mr. Donovan. The penalty will be severe. I deserve it, Frank said quietly. Outside, Robert Clark stood at his sister's grave, holding white roses. After the funeral, he left town. In his jail cell, Frank Donovan sat on the edge of his court, holding their wedding photo. Elizabeth smiled in her white dress, happy and beautiful, real, always real. Only now did he realize it.